On this episode, we talk with our good friend Tyler Harford about faith and deconstruction.
You're listening to the Dudes and Dads Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men be better dudes and dads by building community through meaningful conversation and storytelling. And now, here are your hosts, Joel DeMott and Andy Lehman.
Joel DeMott.
Andrew Lehman. How are you?
Good. I mean, my Eagles won. They're ready. I'm choosing sides this time.
Andy,
I'm hoping.
Andy, these are fighting words for you.
I'm hoping that the Chiefs win tonight. I mean, Again, we're recording this on Sunday evening, so
oh boy,
we'll find out here shortly.
My kids were at a youth group event, and they were like a skating event, and Aaron said he was just going to keep his phone running in the game in the background, like in his pocket, so he could just have a live, could skate and get a live update.
Yeah, good idea.
We'll see what plays out. So you're really going for the Eagles?
I am. I mean, I chose that side this year because I lived in Philadelphia for a year, and I wanted to choose a team.
That's fair. You have Philly connections. That's fair. Here's what I will say. It just seems that you also are going to be sideways with a good portion of your family, and I hope you've counted the cost.
My wife,
namely your wife, namely your wife. Oh gosh. Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Dudes and Dads Podcast. Thanks for tuning into this, the polyphonic wizardry that you're going to experience.
Wow.
Yeah, you heard that's going on a shirt, by the way. I've been thinking of catchphrases. That's going on there. Super glad to have our guest along here tonight, and we're going to be telling you all about him in a second. So Andy, let's just really catch up real quick, because I want to know, what's the status of your bathroom. I just
need to paint the ceiling. We're good.
That's it?
Yeah.
Are you pleased with where it's at?
And put some like hooks and things back up. But yeah,
Gotcha.
I'm very pleased.
It's better than you were. Yeah, you had to move out of your house for a little while.
Right.
You wouldn't take the easy route like I suggested of just putting a porta-john outside. No, you insisted on having running water in your bathroom. Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. I get it. So
thanks, Joel.
But it's all back together now. So
yeah,
we're so happy for you.
It is.
That's
so
good.
How about you? Is your bathroom running?
Yeah, everything is operating. I'm currently, we're heading into a week, Andy, where I am going to be single parenting it, as my wife is at a trade show in Las Vegas. So
fun. Hopefully
I get my wife back, and hopefully she doesn't hit the slots too hard. And that's my number 2 request. Honey, if you're listening, go to bed. No, it's 3 hours earlier. She's
fine.
She's fine. So yeah. Well, hey Andy, do we have anybody that we're supposed to say thank you to?
Not particularly.
Not particularly. Okay. Well, just hey, listeners, thank you.
Yeah, thank you
for tuning in. Appreciate you all. Glad you're here. Hey, so tonight, Andy, shall I introduce our guest?
Let's go bring him on.
Let's do it, and let's not even apologize for it. Hey, our guest tonight is a friend of the show, longtime friend of both Andy and I, our friend Tyler Harford. Tyler Harford, he serves as the Director of Church Leadership and Communications at Evana Network, a community of churches, educational institutions, and mission organizations gathered around a common evangelical Anabaptist vision. If you're wondering what in the world is an evangelical Anabaptist, we have to be very careful. People think it's anti-Baptist. It's not. It's not anti-Baptist. I mean, it might, for some people it might be, but it's not. It's an Anabaptist. Early on, Andy, I got these questions like, why are you
anti-Baptist?
Anti-Baptist. I don't know. Tyler and his wife Janessa have been married for 22 years. They have, you got it, 7 kids. Tyler's a graduate at Hillsdale College, where he studied theater, rhetoric, and persuasion. I mean, that's sexiest degree I've ever heard. Absolutely. He's also a graduate of Weinbrenner Seminary, where he received a Master's of Divinity degree. He has worked in multiple nonprofit sectors before coming to his current role, which included serving as a lead pastor for over 14 years in a single congregation. So now his role with Evana. But here's what I love about Tyler. Number one, he is just the dearest of all friends. I am so grateful to have him in my life. But apart from that, Tyler's church and faith experiences, as we'll find out, he's covered the gamut all over the place. all kinds of different experiences.
I cannot wait to hear.
Wild and crazy stuff, man. But has served in local congregations, has had non-ministry roles, has had pastoral roles, and now serves a network of churches in the kind of greater Midwestern region. So we're just gonna have a talk, because when I was thinking about this conversation, it's been a long-term conversation about people. Andy, you've intersected with them. I know I have. And definitely Tyler has. People who grew up in faith communities, grew up with kind of a traditional faith direction, and then something shifted significantly in their life, usually later on toward their adult years, began to question a lot of things, and then we start hearing this kind of term about their deconstructing faith, going through deconstruction, kind of has been this buzzword, this thing. And I was thinking about Tyler, and I said, if anybody has thought about deconstruction, it's him. So that's why he's on. We're going to have a talk tonight. I'm really excited about it. Are you excited?
I am
as well?
very excited, actually.
See, that's what I need.
Welcome, Tyler, to the show.
Hi, Tyler. Hi, Tyler.
Yeah,
Gosh.
thanks for having me on.
Here's what's super fun is actually our studio right here. Tyler's actual office is just the next. He's been so close yet so far away. We're usually here in the evenings. Tyler's here during the regular part of the day.
And so, I think last show we're like, we need to get Tyler on.
Yeah, it's like he's been just right across the hall.
Yeah. So welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here.
So Tyler, this is the first kind of the long answer question, because your church experiences, and Tyler and I overlap a little bit in this kind of some of the background that we come from, but tell us about just kind of early faith experience for you, where your family comes from, what your early faith community exposures were, and then kind of the trajectory that set you on early in life.
Okay, well, we'll just get into the ugly part first.
Why not? Sounds good. Why not?
Well, actually, you can't have the sacred without the clay, right? There's the holy and the earthy. My kids joke that everything happened in my life when I was 4. It's a family joke. It's that's when you were 4. Well, that's when I got my hearing aid to have profound hearing loss, and it also when my parents were separated. I think any child that experiences divorce, when a mother and a father step apart, a child is half mom, half dad. So if mom and dad can't get along, a child remembers that very distinctly. Can I even get along with myself? And so that's a kind of a living color time for me. And my mother's boss and his family took her in and really just ministered to her. So as a 4-year-old and with my mother set up in a new apartment, we began attending a local Baptist church. My mom had no faith background.
And you're an only child, by the way.
I'm an only child. Yeah. We grew up in central Maine, so Bangor, Maine, and kind of the last city before you get up into the North Maine woods. My mom had no church background. Both sets of grandparents were divorced, and just to make the story short, we both experienced Jesus in a powerful way. And as the Baptists like to do, they rope you in early. And I was baptized at a very young age. Yep. But at the same time, my father really wanted to kind of see if this marriage could be rescued. Was convicted about some things as well. The major part that made their marriage fall apart was infertility and lots of trouble trying to have a child. Then they had me, and then there was just a lot of conflict around that and some other things. So my father then accepted Jesus as his Savior in the early 80s and at Christmas. And lots of amazing stories. Maybe sometime if I come back, I'll share a couple of those. But he and my mom were reunited and in this Baptist church. This was the largest church in New England at the time, led by Buddy Franklin, who was a former roommate of Jerry Falwell. He was so powerful that when Jerry was setting up his moral majority offices, he told Jerry, "Don't do one in Maine. I'll just run it. My church will be the center point."
And so, for context, for our younger listeners as well, see, these names ring a bell with me when I was a younger kid. But this was the moral majority was a big time. It was distinctly Republican, very, very conservative.
Yeah.
Moral majority Christian led, because the whole idea was that in the 80s specifically, that we were going to turn the country around by getting conservative Christian people elected into office. And so there was a network of pastors and politicians that were all working in this direction. So this is kind of the political religious soup that you're in.
Yeah, really in the infancy of it. And Buddy, in the middle of all of this, so I would have gone to the Christian school, started at kindergarten, repeated kindergarten from public to private. And then about second grade, he was going to run for governor. And it came out in the press that, he was accused within the church by the music teacher that was my music teacher. Without getting into too many details, I mean, basically you can imagine overnight, the school collapsed into probably a third the size of it.
So there was a claim of infidelity specifically.
Right, there was very credible claims and a real power struggle, like where he fought to keep leadership. It blew the church apart. We had joined a church plant by one of his associates before this happened, but this was my life, right? The whole school was connected to it. And so very early on, lots of good people hurt. And the family that led us to Christ walked out the door and as far as I know, never darkened the door of a church again. And I had grown up with their 3 boys. I was the same age as the middle one, and they were just like family to me. This was such a big deal that People magazine did a feature article on it. 60 Minutes came and interviewed congregation members and other former congregation members. And Wallace, he came and sat in our kitchen and interviewed my father and mother. I distinctly remember a strong smell of alcohol and cigarettes and lots of cameras and lights in our kitchen. Yeah. And so it's just burned into me, right? Another separation, another divorce. Then the church that I went to, so that was split number one. Then the church that I went to, the associate pastor was loved and had a real rapport with all the younger families, and walked out, left the church, took all the young families, and my parents taught me that staying is important, and living through the difficult times is important, like they tried to do with their own marriage. And so I wound up being the only teenager in that church, my first year of junior high. And that was pretty rough, but my pastor took me under his wing and he mentored me, and we did lots of things together. Looking back at it, kind of the beginning of realizing that maybe I had a call to ministry. In the meantime, the pastor that left had an affair with a woman that left with them, and that particular church plant. The Baptists that are listening, they sometimes plant by splitting rather than intentionally planting. My church recovered, began growing again, and who was the only pastor that didn't have a moral failing. However, I think he modeled a pastor that didn't have any patience. So like you kind of displayed that lack of grace that you sometimes see, just a real quick temper, particularly with service workers. Then my college experience plugged into a Baptist church out that way, and my pastor came out and told the pastor that I should fill the pulpit when he's gone. So here's a freshman in college that would fill the pulpit from time to time with that church. And they really, great relationship. But then when I graduated, that church also went through a very painful split. And then my home church, my pastor I grew up under, left. And I know this kind of feels like this long litany, but it's important, I think, because he left, and when they brought in a new candidate, that candidate was voted down by a whole family block that was led by the woman who led me to Christ.
So there's you see this disconnect of like, here's this person that was a significant influence in your life, but you would see them also as creating this division within your faith community.
Correct. And My father at the time was the head elder in the church and had been told that he needed to find a pastor. He helped bring that candidate in, and so then with the elder board in private saying they had support, in public, it was very divided. It came out that way. Again, I was aware, so I didn't know all the details, but I do know that there was high-fiving going on in the sanctuary while the candidate was still in the sanctuary.
Oh, wow.
And so that candidate then started a church in the area with the families that voted for him.
It's not funny, but it is. I mean, it's sad.
Yeah, and
right?
and the thing is this is where my own family was involved in that, kind of feeling like, no, the Lord has called this person to ministry.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was a situation where they couldn't afford him full time anymore because it was a split, he had to work in the local school.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what happened when he was working in the local school?
Oh, no.
He had an emotional affair with another woman that was working in the school. At the same time, the pastor that the other church, my home church, brought in, within just a few years, managed to get the parsonage in his name. And on Christmas Eve, they discover he had absconded with a bunch of their cash and was living in the parsonage next to the church in his name. And as far as I know, he may still be living there today.
Wow. So basically stole
from the church.
Stole from the church.
Yeah. And so in my 20s, here, like I'm landing in Toledo, Ohio, and working for the Toledo Symphony at the time, and just running into all these really beautiful people, the artistic world, and, all kinds of crazy things I never expected. 20 plus years ago, my supervisor was a transgender who was going through a sex change operation, like stuff a boy from Central Maine just never expected.
Right.
But beautiful people, and I was just done. And we were at a Baptist church there, and when the guy told me that I needed to tell my wife to get baptized the real way, instead of being poured on, you just tell her what to do. I said, so what part does personal choice have in all of this?
But which, by the way, Baptist, I mean, this is the whole thing about, right, our general Baptist, Anabaptist theology is that it is a believer's like it is a high value of a personal choice.
Right. Choice.
Yeah. Right.
Methods may be debated. Dunk 3 times in the name of the Trinity or whatever.
Yeah. Forwards, backwards.
But we're just done. I was just done.
Yeah.
Absolutely done. Absolutely done. And maybe as a note to it, I was just really thankful that we did, after a number of months, found myself in a little Mennonite church in Toledo and experienced grace, and they kind of just loved me through my questions.
Yeah.
And around the same time, I saw my father dying, my father-in-law dying of cancer, and got to witness a pastor ministering to him in a way that I'd never seen before. And I was married to a woman who had not experienced kind of that level of dysfunction within the church.
Yeah.
So I think what I might do is just leave it to you to ask the next question.
Yeah.
I tried to count up how many splits.
Yeah.
And I feel each one of them very deeply.
Yeah.
And I don't say it lightly that I have no rose-colored glasses about the bride of Christ. But that is the bride of Christ.
Yeah, well, Luther, that classic line, the church is my mother, but she's also a whore, and
right, yeah. There is no plan B.
Yeah,
and as our friend Timothy David Miller says, the bride of Christ grows more beautiful every day, in spite of our.
Gosh.
In spite of our,
and I absolutely want to believe that, and I think that to be true if you have a global perspective on the church.
That's exactly right.
It's probably the important thing to say.
Yeah.
So, Tyler, you hear this story again and again. Like for you growing up in your formative years, because all of us, Andy, you, myself, we know as we're raising our kids, all these things are happening during your formative years, where most kids are, young people are forming the foundation of their faith. and most of that's happening through the relationships they're having in faith community. And all these relationships that you're having they're together and they're broken, split.
Right.
And eventually, aren't you just tempted to say, I think this whole Christianity thing, for everything that's been promised to me and proclaimed to me and, this, that, and the other.
Right.
Are you tempted to say, I don't think these people believe this at all, and maybe even worse, maybe this whole thing is just a joke. Like that, maybe this is just sort of a kind of a for lack of a better term, just another organization that is wielding power and influence for its own purposes. And do they even really believe what they say they believe? I mean, are those thoughts that go through your mind?
I've learned, human institutions will just always fail you. You lean on them, sometimes they break, and those points just go right into your side.
Mm-hmm.
And we know Jesus, that was his experience, right? He prayed the word of the psalmist that says, behold, my friend who broke bread with me has now lifted up his heel against me.
Yeah.
Right. I was in this weird dynamic tension, right? There's all this conflict, but then since my family wasn't from a robust Christian environment, my father did have Catholic background. I would come home from the Christian school every day and tell them what I learned.
Mm-hmm.
So in my household, the roles were almost reversed.
Interesting.
They would say, "What did you learn?" And I would share from chapel or Bible. The other thing that happened is that in that brokenness, we saw amazing things happen too. A local Pentecostal school shut down, and all these students in 1 year landed in a cessationist school that didn't believe that the Holy Spirit spoke and made people speak in tongues, and suddenly we had kids in chapel
acting a little bit out of order, a little bit out of the norm.
So we had these out of ashes beauty.
Yeah.
I think another thing that the fundamentalist perspective did give to me that I've never given up is that there is this sense that the word is trustworthy and true. I've abandoned the word inerrant because in reality that's only built on the King James argument. If people really want to use it, they'll say inerrant in autographs, original autographs, and then they'll say the King James is the God-inspired version. Which I would always say, well, then what do the Spanish-speaking and German-speaking and other people use? But anyways, I digress. There's such a high value on the word, which actually I found I could use in context against them as well. I was the one that was kind of annoying in Sunday school class because I'd be like, well, the Bible actually says, this.
Right.
And so even though it's a very deeply human document with whole sections where they say, the original meaning is not certain.
Yeah.
That actually makes me trust it more. It's very, it's just been handled for 2,000, 4,000 years,
So is there, because you touched on this, and this is, I come from a background. So my dad was saved into a King James only church. He became a believer in his earlier 20s, KJV only. And he didn't, that really it's when he went to seminary actually where that all got messed up for him, right?
Sure.
In a Baptist evangelical Baptist seminary, but at the same time it got really messed up for him. My mom grew up in an independent fundamental Bible church, where again, to your point, high value of Scripture, high value of the Word, but there's something else in the midst of that. There's a posture of heart and and this is what I wonder when we're talking about deconstruction. There is a concrete certainty with which everything is stated, and that within kind of the fundamentalist ideal, right?
Right. There's an uncomfortableness with ambiguity. There are things where if you pull one plank out, if that is negotiable, then the whole platform you're standing on can be quicksand. Right?
Yeah.
Like we all want certainty, and it's just so much easier to have just this simple belief, this simple truth, and just know that God said it, I believe it, it's done. But that's really not how Scripture is written in most cases, right? It's poetry, it's narrative work, it's all these. But I think that we need to come to terms with the ability to say, life is messy, faith is messy, and this certainty is in some ways a lack of intellectual and faithful rigor. I think coming to the faith out of a non-Christian or not very formed background, I had to wrestle with it even at a young age to own it. But then a lot of people have been born into it. It's what they've known. It's the faith of their fathers and mothers. Yeah. And so all of us at some point, to borrow the famous word of the great theologians, Tears for Fears, it's break it down again, right? Like we at some point, every one of us is going to have a crisis of faith, a dark night of the soul, and cheap, simple platitudes will just never cut it. I think one of the things that always fascinated me is when I heard the story about Mother Teresa's diaries being read after she died.
Yeah.
Where she's like, I haven't seen or heard from the Lord in decades.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and people are like, see, what a hypocrite. But St. John of the Cross says that's the dark night of the soul, right? Like that's when we look deep into the heart of man and realize our brokenness,
right?
And cry out for a Savior. We got to be okay with that.
And I just think of people who are near and dear to me who lived, maybe their younger years or lived up to a certain point in life with what seemed to me like this rock solid, unshakable faith. Like they were just this consistent, like, man, of all people, I know I can always look to them and say, like, man, they're always going to, be holding fast. And then something happens. Something happens. And I wonder, Tyler, from your experience, because I look to your experience and I go, man, if anybody had the opportunity to, again, just to say, I really question the validity of this whole Christianity thing. I mean, you were offered multiple opportunities, I think, to go there, but you chose by God's grace and by a number of other things to go a different direction. What was different? What's been different for you?
I think, Joel, too, to go back to what you were saying is not only have we seen lots of people that we know personally have to kind of have this whatever, but we've seen lately a lot of people that we grew up with in the faith, musicians and speakers and leaders who have turned and said, I don't believe anything that I used to believe.
And it was even harder because they were so public.
Right. They were so public with what they believed.
Platform.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And now we see them saying, I don't believe anything what I used to believe.
Well, again, this is a big topic because we don't know what all factors are at play. Are we dealing with internal factors where someone's wrestling with their sexuality? Are we dealing with external factors where there's been spiritual abuse or physical or sexual abuse, financial misconduct? I mean, there's any number of things that can happen to somebody that make them say, I'm done with the church, right? I said this at a retreat this weekend, and I got a lot of laughs, and I didn't really realize that people thought that I didn't, like I
you
really
weren't trying to be funny?
I wasn't trying to be funny. Even my wife maybe was just a little embarrassed, but I guess I'm going to try it out on you guys.
Good. This is the kind of show where you get to,
there we go.
Get to experiment.
Someone said, well, I don't know if I want to sign a covenant, right? Because that means, it's kind of this, it's a legalistic, black and white thing.
Gotcha.
And someone said, well, I only said my vows to my wife once. And I don't have to repeat them every year. You don't have to re-up my covenant to my wife every year. And I looked at him and said, well, I renew my vows every day.
Oh, come on now.
Well, I mean, that's the relationship with the church, right? Like the bride of Christ, members of the church at some point have to come to the point where they say, you know what, I wake up every day and I choose to follow Jesus. And I'm on a journey with other people, and other people are messy. I am not saying stay connected to an environment that shields sex offenders. I am not saying gloss over financial misconduct. But what I am saying is for us to just go at it alone and say that we don't need community anymore, and say that maybe we do believe at least in God or Jesus, like there's comes a point where you have to just say, there is no plan B. I'm going to go this direction. And trust me, now that I'm over like multiple churches in different settings, it's you want to say, oh, here's this God's eye view that kind of gives you like a great picture of everything being so hunky-dory. But no, what gets to me, what comes to me is usually just what makes me want to walk away at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ways that people treat pastors. We see so much in this culture of the big pastors that fail. Oh, yeah. But 90% of pastors are out there slogging away, and they're
doing the hard work.
The things that people are saying and doing to them are just not right. You would never do that in a place of business,
right? Mm-hmm. They're treated they're as a dedicated professional. They are treated in a way that would never be permissible in any other setting,
and they're expected to do it for less with less benefits because they're missionaries.
Anyways,
we digress.
Yes, sorry.
But I think we all need rose-colored glasses. And don't need rose-colored glasses. Let's lean into the deconstruction thing.
Yeah,
like does it resonate with me?
Well, yeah, I think so. At some point, if there's been this big, and from our background, evangelicalism, but fundamentalist evangelicalism, there's this big superstructure that exists of all these doctrinal points and all these things that build on like I'm, for instance, and I'm not a Reformed Christian, but like if you're in a Reformed Baptist, or which is many of the case, it's one layer built upon another. It's this whole structure built on another of theological presupposition after another, right? And because you mentioned it is kind of this house of cards thing that happens. And if you question one thing, all the other stuff can feel like it's teetering and it's going to collapse. And then if it does collapse, what do you do? What's left? The answer for many has been I'm going to start all over again. Like I'm going to take everything off the table.
And we have an issue like in Western Christianity where you almost have this Baskin-Robbins kind of approach to like evangelicalism. Am I reacting to Reformed like total depravity Christianity? That's the Calvinist approach where maybe they're even okay with going out for a beer and a cigar and such. And then you're over at the other end where extreme charismatic, where like you're not a believer unless you've been poured out on by the Spirit and speak in tongues. So like again, evangelicalism as a monolith.
Yeah.
Really, when you get down into the ranks, if you react to one, I'm watching a dear young man that has had a profound influence on my children's lives. He's left behind an apostolic Pentecostal stream.
Sure.
They had a high value on ways of dressing and behaving, and I'm watching him play out that deconstruction in reaction to that experience.
Right.
And what you're saying, and I would agree, is a lot of people then kind of react against the whole stream of evangelicalism, and they move into either a kind of a general deism, a belief in God, or maybe an agnosticism, or maybe they'll move into an extreme form of progressivism that sometimes even looks more like universalist, right? Mm-hmm. Because God is pure love, and there's no eternal punishment, that kind of stuff. So there's a couple of things that have helped me with this, and one is having the opportunity to sit at the feet of global Christians, where when you have persecution from the outside and this kind of refining that happens, you may have different denominations, but they work really closely together, and you really have no social advantage to being a Christian.
Yeah, in those places.
There's nothing to be gained in the Indian culture or other cultures that I've been in, Mongolian. There's just different places where, like, you gain nothing by being a Christ follower except that you have a savior and you have a group and a community that you can go through suffering together. Right.
Yep.
I also think that in Western Christianity, we are reacting again in a way that says, I believe that God and Satan get blamed for a heck of a lot of things that human beings do. Right?
Yeah.
So like, are we really reacting against God and faith? or are we reacting against kind of a broken model of Christianity in the Western world?
Yep.
Right. So it's I'm trying to narrow it down. We're heading a direction here, but what are they actually reacting against? And so when you have a Christian artist,
right,
or a top leader that is failing, are they reacting to a true faith, or are they reacting to some kind of construct that's been created in Western?
Well, then you have to look at the people who looked up to those people growing up and are now questioning their faith because, the leader I looked up to can't believe, so maybe I can't either. So you have those people on that end that you're looking up to. The people, it wasn't necessarily that God failed them,
right?
But somebody that they were looking up to had failed,
right,
and chose to walk away.
But what you find out is, and this is a thing I fear, quite honestly, you begin to find out that actually your faith and your trust was actually in a human being, right? And by the way, all the structures that you were surrounded with did nothing but to A-OK that, like to reinforce that or to give that a positive thing, as opposed to saying, and hopefully, Tyler, and Andy as well, like the communities that we're in, allegedly, we say that we value mutual accountability amongst all of us.
Right.
That no one is greater than another. It's just that we have different gifts that we're co-ministering together in community, right? But it's like, hey, your title of senior pastor doesn't identify you as some sort of spiritual superhero over and against the person sitting in the pew.
And one thing working in that favor is there actually isn't even an advantage for me now to say that I'm a pastor.
Yeah.
I saw a stream just the other day. Someone said, so what do you think the hottest part of hell is reserved for? And someone said a megachurch pastor. And then the dog piling became.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like there's like there is in some respect our culture a kind of a devaluing of authority just to begin with.
Well, and I even wondered myself recently, when I was applying for a secular non-for-profit job, which I'm in now. My resume had pastor just emblazoned all over it. I mean, that's what I've done for the last 17 years. And it was the first time, I had this interesting feeling of the first time where it's like, this history, this role, what I have done doesn't carry with it an inherent value outside of the context that I've been in. Like, that's kind of a number one, it's a humbling thing, but I think it's actually, it's much more the posture in which we should walk. And I think maybe the pendulum is swinging a little bit there in that direction. The other thing that you said, Tyler, though, that I want to point out, are second and third world Christians deconstructing faith?
I don't know enough about that.
I just wonder, and I'm kind of, it's a little, the people that I know, Tyler, the people that I know that are primarily white, evangelicals, middle upper class.
But I'm wondering too, Joel, if that's because I think as church in America, we have less reliance necessarily on God. And by that I mean, like, we're not necessarily relying on him for our job. We don't see we're not seeing a lot of times, whereas these everyday little things are faith, like where the church in different places outside of the U.S., they're relying, I think, more on God and praying to God for survival,
right?
Where we're not necessarily doing that,
right?
And so maybe that's where they're not necessarily. And that's deconstructing is
100%.
The growing church in America is actually taking place within African American and Latino groups. I mean, I don't remember if it was Pew or Gallup, but one of the things that people aren't talking much about is actually one of the fastest sections of the evangelical church to grow is in the Black African American community.
Yeah.
Now, again, that is a different definition of evangelicalism. One of the things that bothers me is that evangelicalism from a global perspective is a beautiful thing. Like it's Bebington's quadrilateral, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this idea that there's the high value on the cross, and there's this expectation. Actually, the fourth point of Bebington's quadrilateral is that you will act in social justice, which is an inflammatory word for American evangelicals. But the reality is being also needs to be connected to doing.
Yeah.
So in the global world, what I've experienced is an extreme reliance on the Lord for daily provisions, for protection, and for strength in suffering. And so maybe some of this too that we're dealing with, and again, please hear me, if you are a survivor of spiritual abuse, sexual abuse, infidelity of any kind from leadership, like, you have the right to be upset and to not be able to trust well.
And you've used the term spiritual abuse. I just think for our listeners, because that can mean a lot of different things to people, what comes to your mind? Like, how would you define that experience?
Well, I think the simplest way is to simply say, like, I think that it's a power over. Well, you kind of get this sense that, like, we all know that we do things that are wrong, right? We all do things that are wrong. But it's when somebody who is in power over you then comes and shames you, trying to get you back into the kingdom or to behave a certain way through shame instead of love.
And sometimes leveraging like eternal consequence for that, right? Like when there's eternal, I think that's a scary power to have, right? When you're saying do this or
you're going to be
you're going to burn, right?
One of my friends in high school, his girlfriend got pregnant out of wedlock, and someone slid the birth announcement under the door of the administration, and that didn't go well. And I always thought to myself, I think the Christian response to that should have been, what can we do to position this couple for the greatest success?
Right. Instead of shame, guilt, and kind of a power play thing.
So these experiences for me have given me a real high sense of justice. Like, I have no tolerance for like sexual abuse within the church. Like, that's something that, like, 90% of the time, any kind of victim that comes forward, there's nothing to be gained by coming forward, and we just know that it's probably true to some degree.
Right.
So it's interesting to me that Baptist side of me that's very black and white kind of rears its head in those moments.
Yeah.
But the other side of it, though, is just to come open-handed and recognize that the Lord is the judge, not me. And that means I can still recognize evil. I can still recognize wrongdoing. But it's not really up to me to kind of bring that home.
So I want to talk about, and this is a thing I think all of us with kiddos. I mean, let me see. Tyler, your eldest is a freshman in college. The twins are 10?
9. About 10. So 2 girls, 3 boys, and 2 girls.
So you got a whole
You're all over the
wide age range. Andy and I, kind of similar areas. Andy's eldest is
just passed his driving test. By the way,
that a boy,
if listeners want to watch a fun time, let the Hartford kids get together with the layman and the
oh boy,
that's creepy. Great.
They have in our church gathering, the big gatherings, we call them like the roving feral herd of kids.
Yeah, they're like feral animals. That's right. Yeah. Tyler, as you think about your kids and their faith formation.
Right.
Moving forward as a father and as a leader, knowing that, and just for the viewers, the listeners, reference, Tyler's eldest daughter, Cadence. I mean, she's in college studying to be a nurse right now, at Bethel University, and already, like, Tyler and Janessa have raised thinkers. They've raised, and it's very clear to me, like, critical thinkers, which can feel dangerous, right? It can feel dangerous because they ask all the hard questions.
Right. Well, Cadence actually just told us that she told her nursing dean that she was bored in chemistry class. I'm like, don't do that.
Don't say that.
But I mean, they don't mince words. Right?
Yeah. And so, but like, as you think about your kids and you think about like the day that they might need to, like, to feel like they need to deconstruct or whatever it is, or have a, what would be your hope in terms of how they would go about that? Maybe the questions that they would ask, or the general posture that they would take in that process. Because as we said, we're not demonizing. Like, I've heard plenty of conservative evangelicals like deconstruction is this 4-letter word.
I think everybody needs to deconstruct to some level. You have to at some point own the faith for yourself.
Right. I think I mean, if you dig in and try to figure out why you believe what you believe. Because I think a lot of us were raised in, not everyone, I can't speak for everyone, but like, us at least, were, raised in the church. And I think at some point you have to make that faith your own, not your parents. Because if you don't, I think that's when you're going to lose it and go, I don't really believe in anything because it's not really my own faith. And when you sit and make that your own faith, I think that's where it strengthens it.
So I guess I needed to make a point earlier that I dropped. I am so thankful that I went through my wrestling. So like I remember accepting Christ, as a young child. When I was 12, I spent many nights crying, kind of this deep existential despair, that every teenager goes through at some level. And then in my 20s, but social media didn't exist at that time. And that's a point I wanted to make. You guys talk about technology and its role on people's brains and relationship. There is something to be said about, and please hear me, if you're deconstructing right now and you're posting your journey online, just be aware that there's a dopamine hit that comes from getting a like on that post and a large number of people saying, yes, that's where I'm at. And you feel like you've built a community. But in the long run, a lot of times that community is not concerned about your end goal and where you're going. They're saying, I'm there with you.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that I don't have this like these markers where I put down a stake on social media that I believe this certain way and these people are all bleeps,
right.
And then like I have no way to take it back, right? Like to some extent, I think deconstruction at a healthy level needs to take place within a group of caring, understanding friends who may not be where you're at, or maybe already walked away from the faith. But when you're doing that on social media and publicly, maybe I'll end it with, in seminary they teach you that human sexuality is the same side, it's a different side of the same coin as intimacy with the Lord. And so I don't go around explaining all the intimate moments that I go through with my wife.
Thank you.
Good, bad, and ugly. Janessa is going, praise be to God, although she wouldn't put it past me in some cases. But then the other side is but your intimacy with the Lord, like there are things that the Holy Spirit says to me that I'm not going to share with just anybody.
Sure.
There's an intimacy in that relationship. And that's kind of how we've tried, model with the kids. I talked to my wife before I came in. I said, now, honey, do we have any secret sauce or anything with raising the kids?
Yeah.
Like 7 kids, it's just managed chaos. Let's just admit it, right? Like it's herding cats half the time. A week will go by and you're like, hey, you know what? Everyone's clothed and fed. We didn't go to the ER. Hey,
we're good.
That's a win.
We are winning.
Winning, yeah.
So there are 2 foundational verses that have really hit me as a believer, and this is what I've tried to do with my kids. In Mark 9:24, you got the story of the father whose son keeps throwing himself in the fire.
Yep.
Like we have parents that may listen. They have children that maybe physical disabilities, mental disabilities, relational disabilities. I mean, there's just stuff that they just need healing for. Some parents are just scrambling for help. And, I don't know. I just have prayed so much. Like, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief.
Yeah.
That's just a cornerstone to my faith, and my kids kind of know it. Like, it's just like there are areas we believe and areas we don't believe, and we're really working hard for the Lord to give us some answers. The other one is from John 6:28-29, where the disciples say, what do we do to do the work that the Lord requires? And Jesus responds, the work of God is this, believe in the one whom he's sent. And it feels like when we kind of like put that block in place, a lot of other things fall into place. Belief leads to doing, and doing leads to belief, and we just keep building on that. So I'm just really thankful that I didn't have social media kind of like marking the moments that I, ranted and raved against the things that were very real. As far as other things with my kids, I just actually said something online tonight to a friend. I said, I'm actually kind of glad I may underparent than overparent. Like, I know what underparent looks like, and those are the ones that are running around like making snow angels and flour on the aisle of the grocery store. But Or one child I remember seeing of another family that climbed into the yogurt section of the cooler, shut the door, and started eating yogurt.
Oh my!
But what I mean is, like, I don't ever want to be that attack helicopter parent who also then behaves the same way towards their children, where they're not allowed to ask a question. Granted, in my home, there are times when you kind of have to be a military commander with 7 kids. Like, you can't just let everybody do their thing. But I've really tried to kind of be a little more open-handed, allow them to ask questions. I was in an environment that didn't allow a lot of questions. I've tried to shield them from the details of bad things in the church, but I've always been very open about what we're going through. Cadence, my oldest, is studying to be a nurse but wants to be in medical missions, and my next daughter wants to be in full-time ministry. And to me, like, I've not hidden the good, bad, and the ugly from them. I've been very open about my doubts and my fears and my frustrations, and still tried to love people through them. My last pastoral assignment was absolutely amazing. Wonderful people. Still love my peeps at Pleasant View. But, people say stupid things and do really hurtful things to you, and they don't even realize it. Or if they can't get to you, they'll do it to your kids. And yet overall, I've heard way worse horror stories. Maybe another, like, concrete example would be, I love the arts. My background is theater and art, and I love music. And I remember when I was in the Christian school, they showed these movies called Hell's Bells, and if you listen to rock and roll, you're going to hell, and everything played backwards is Satan worship. Going to hell. And everybody, like, dies young, to tell that to the Rolling Stones. But I remember sitting there with my friends going, holy cow, what is this? Like, how can I listen to more of it? It's like Adam and Eve, right? Like you fence off the tree and suddenly, like, I want that
more tree.
All the fruit around me, but I want it from that tree. So we just listen to a lot of different styles of music, and we talk about it. I enjoy the creativity. Let's be honest. Some non-believing musicians and songwriters actually may be better theologians than some of the current praise music we listen to. Maybe one more story.
Sure,
we always
absolutely.
ask all kinds of, like, crazy questions about the Bible. Like, the Bible is pretty R-rated.
Yeah, right.
I remember when my grade school daughter, the oldest one, was reading through the Bible. And we said, oh my goodness, you're reading through the Bible. And she goes, yeah, I'm already to, like, halfway through the Old Testament. And we're like, oh my gosh. Like, I have an illustrated Genesis, and it says it's, like, rated R, right? Every verse is illustrated.
Right.
And my daughter and I, Cadence, this goes out to you, we were going to write a book about all the really weird stories of the Bible. But if you ever want to read it, somebody's already written it. His name is Luke Harrington, and it's called Murder Bears, Moonshine, and Mayhem. And it's just a great book about the Bible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think there's and I've seen this in your guys' family, Tyler, and I really think having open, honest conversations, the deconstruction goes wrong when things are kept in the dark. When things are too risky to talk about, when mom and dad are too, where they haven't worked through their own stuff and they're too uncomfortable to discuss.
So today Julie gave the sermon here at Clinton Frame, and it was on intergenerational relationships, and I think that speaks to this too, because I think that can really help if you're having an intergenerational relationship, because not only are you able to speak to people that are younger than you, but then you can have people who have had way more life experience speak into your life too, and especially if they're willing to be open and honest, being like, yo, I had a really terrible time in my faith, and I had to step back and stuff, and then you can talk with them about that, and before you're experiencing it yourself. I think that's
I think of Andy. I think of people here at this church here at Clinton Frame who've been walking with Jesus a lot longer than I have, and who have gone through an immense amount of suffering and pain and things like that, and they're still following after. And I'll be honest, there is nothing like talking with them about their faith when you are having you're feeling a little bit sideways spiritually, you know, because you're like the perspective that it brings, and that's why I want to say, for anybody who's struggling with faith right now or struggling with what they believe, that is not a battle for you to fight alone. Like that is not something for you to that's something to work out. And by the way, I would say talk to somebody, because here's the thing: when I know when I'm when I've been in a bad place spiritually, and I am like about ready to write the church off or whatever it has been or whatever, there are certain people that I know that if I talk to them, they are going to lovingly like slap me upside the head, and they're going to say, okay, let's take an honest, unbiased look at this whole thing, right? And then there are other people that I know I could go to who will just cheer me on in the direction that I'm heading, right? So a little bit of it has to do with some intellectual honesty on our part about who is it that we're surrounding ourselves with, or what direction are we actually wanting to go. If you want to be an honest deconstructionist and just go where the facts lead or whatever, let me invite you to that. Let me invite you to that, because I stand here firmly to say, listen, truth needs no pillars. You shall know the truth, and it will set you free. And I think that's ultimately we've had a big conversation here. I don't think we've actually overtly said it. We're looking to a person, not a religion. We're looking to a person that was
Jesus saves, religion kills.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing that I think has been so frequently lost in all of this. I have as a pastor, as a believer, I have zero conviction of calling, that I want to call people to a religion. Like that's not where I'm starting. I want to call them to the person that has changed my life, that's changed all of our lives, that's made a significant difference, and then walk it out from there.
Right.
And I wish that, I think that's probably where my biggest burden on my heart is. I wish that was people. I wish that was the more common experience.
Right.
I wish that's where it all started.
Agreed.
And that's, it's so interesting. Like my parents, when they came out of fundamentalism, what they were left with was just Jesus. Like that was it.
Right.
And so that's how they raised my brother and I. It was like, here's the non-negotiable, Christ. That's non-negotiable. What he has done in space, in time, who he is. All the other stuff, go crazy, have fun, explore all you want. So I just think, Tyler, that's so much of your story that you were, and honestly that you found the freedom, and you've modeled the freedom in doing that. And man, I'm glad you shared with us. Thanks for hanging out. That's good.
We have one more thing.
Oh yes, we do.
Now it's time for the Dudes and Dads Pop Quiz.
Yep.
All right. So if you've never joined us, the Pop Quiz is the time where we just pepper. And I literally pepper Tyler with questions.
Nothing sports related, please.
Right. I have a whole deck of cards here that I'm asking from. And Joel, I don't know what you're asking from, but
I got you. I'm pulling my list up.
I'll go ahead and start.
Thank you.
All right, Tyler, who is your favorite hero of fiction?
Yeah. Tyler's
can't
totally
prepare.
caught off guard.
Fiction, book, or movie?
It just says
doesn't
fiction,
matter.
So
Fiction.
either one.
I love Jason Bourne.
Oh,
that's
attaboy.
that's a good one.
I've often said that Tyler is kind of my pastoral Jason Bourne. And most people don't hear that often enough.
I have amnesia all the time.
That's true. I can't remember. Oh, that's awesome.
And I have some killer kung fu moves.
Yes. Yeah. You better stretch first. Tyler, let me ask you, what is your favorite outdoor activity?
Ooh. I know this is maybe cheating a little bit, but I love the barbecue. Like I love to cook actually over an open fire. I have a stack of cherry wood out behind in my barn.
Come on now.
I love to do different kinds of meat over the cherry wood.
So when are we getting together for a barbecue?
100%. It's time. Let's get it on the calendar.
Low and slow.
All right, Tyler, if you could send a message to the entire world, what would you say in 30 seconds?
Oh, gosh.
The saddest thing I ever did see was a woodpecker pecking at a plastic tree. Friend, he said as he turned to me, things ain't as sweet as they used to be. But they actually are pretty sweet.
I didn't see that coming. Oh, wow.
Oh, Shel Silverstein.
Gosh, such a renaissance, man. Tyler, speaking of food, we'll do this. What is the weirdest food that you've ever eaten? And because you've been places, so I'm just assuming you've ingested
Weirdest
some
food.
stuff.
So I was eating this amazing soup in northern Italy, and it had some of the best noodles I've ever had. And towards the end, as the soup started getting cold, it had kind of a funky barnyard taste to it. And this guy sitting next to me goes, "So, are you loving this pigskin soup?"
Oh.
And it was this shredded pigskin that looked like noodles, and it was something.
Best of serve.
Something.
Clearly, best of serve.
There was also the meal where the main dish was donkey.
Oh.
And so my wife's 82-year-old grandfather, firm believer in Jesus, when he heard the story, he turned to me, "So, what you're telling me is you've eaten..."
Yep.
Yeah, this is a family show.
Yeah.
It was very awkward.
I'm sure.
Oh, man. All right, my last question is, what would be your best day ever?
Janessa, if you're listening,
Oh, here it comes.
we just did it today. We went to Castaneda's.
Yeah.
Local Goshen Mexican eatery where they make homemade gorditas from scratch, and they make their tortillas from scratch. So if you're listening from Castaneda's, go out on the town, have some of that. And then what's the Mexican ice cream place down over there?
Tropicana.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. The Tropicana.
Yeah. I'd like to say then a movie or something, but they really aren't hitting very many good movies lately.
Okay. Tyler, what is, can you name for us a contest that you've won in your lifetime?
Oh.
Have you ever won a contest?
Yeah, I won the best. Goshen had a competition for salsa downtown, and I made some homemade salsa for that.
Yeah.
And it won.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, I was pretty excited about that.
As around these parts, that's a big swing.
Right.
It's a big swing. White male from Central Maine in a town that has some of the best Mexican restaurants.
Hey, that's a nice flex. I'll take it. Awesome, Tyler. Thanks, buddy.
Oh man, it's been an honor.
You've successfully passed the Dudes and Dads Pop Quiz. Way to go! Nice job. Nice job.
Thanks for being on. We appreciate you coming on and being willing to be open and share with us just a little bit more about your faith and where you've been.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Guys, hey, as always, you can send over your comments, thoughts for other shows, all the good stuff over at dudesanddanspodcast@gmail.com.
That's a nice song you got there.
Thank you. Dudesanddanspodcast.com. It's got the show notes, all the good stuff over there.
Everything. And we'd love to have you send us a voicemail, 574-213-8702.
As always, it won't wake us up. We will listen to it, and maybe sometimes show it on the show. If it's a good message, we like to put it on the show.
Challenge us. Give us a good message.
Give us a good message.
Call in.
Friends, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. We look forward to joining you next time. And until then, we wish you grace
and peace.
Be sure to share the podcast on your favorite social media channels.